Welcome, everyone. This is the fourth and final session of the Moral Philosophy of Rabbi Isaac Hutner with Rabbi Alex Ozar. We've been learning with him for the past 3 weeks about the Pahad Yitzhak, Rabbi Isaac Hutner's grand work. It's been a pleasure learning with Rabbi Ozar. Sources will be shared on screen, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in chat. Please feel to ask Rabbi Ozar when he takes questions. All I ask is if you're not directly speaking to keep yourself muted so that you don't pick up on background noise. And with that, I'm handing over the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Thank you so much to everybody and to Drisha. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. Um, it is it as it turns out, four sessions was not even close to enough to cover the material I was hoping to get through, which is a good lesson to have learned. There's some highly artificial selectivity that's going to go into what we're going to do with this last session. But I do think we can get to somewhere of value. Um, we've been tracing this motif in Rav Hutner of the progressive, the breach, the covenant, the foundation of the Torah and the giving of the Torah as the progressive bringing together, interweaving of the moral and interpersonal on the one hand, and the religious and spiritual and transcendent on the other hand, the earthly and the heavenly, the human and the divine. We last time we went through a number of at least four of specific ways in which Hutner tries to offer concrete expression um, as to what it looks like. What are the mechanics of these two realms being interwoven and interpenetrating each other? I'm not going to rehearse the whole thing, so I want to get to what is a relatively long text, but just to set things up the final pair of strands that Refiner puts forward on this front. On the one hand, he says that Torah, yes, it comes from heaven. It is given to Moshe Min Hashemayim from heaven at Sinai. It's heteronomously sent down, given down from on high, and received by human beings. Um, and also, in order to fully become what it is meant to be, in order to fully become Torah, it must be given given concrete application and specification by human minds, the rabbinic mind in particular. So there are many areas of Torah of halakha where this is explicit, and I think Rav Hutner believes, based on Ramban and others, this is true in virtually every area of halakha, that it only becomes practicable, it only becomes actionable when processed through the faculties of human intellectual spontaneity. You have a human intellect receiving the divine material and creatively, in some sense, autonomously, uh, discerning and devising and creating what it's meant to look like in real life. And so you have what Rav Hutner calls, based on an earlier midrash, the breaking down of the barriers, this kind of transgressive traversal of the barrier between heaven and earth, and an interpenetration of the human and the divine, where they come to be seen as one. They come to be one. And on the other hand, and in the corollary to this, in my framing, is Rav Hutner's idea. I think this is based. I think I said last time. I don't know exactly where philosophically you get this from. I do think that the core of it is from a philosopher named Max Scheler. He was a very important figure in early 20th century Germany. If you ask somebody now who was the most important philosopher in Germany in the 1930s, they would say, well, obviously Martin Heidegger, maybe Husserl before that, but it would become Heidegger. But if you asked Martin Heidegger in the 1930s who was the most important philosopher in Germany, he would have said Max Scheler. We know this. We have it on record. He said so. And everyone read Scheler. Soloveitchik read Shaler, and I showed in my first major publication, actually like significantly plagiarized Max Shaler in a work he had left unpublished at the time of his death, and it was later published without anyone noticing that it had been plagiarized from Shaler. But Abraham Joshua Heschel also read Shaler extensively. Alexander Altman, who was another major intellectual, wrote a dissertation on Shaler. Everybody was reading Shaler. Shaler had this idea. Um, was trying to understand the relationship between humanity or animality and the fact that we're bodily beings with instincts and drives and needs, and our higher intellectual capacities and our spiritual capacities. He says, there are, and what does it look like? He's trying to understand what does it look like for us to realize ourselves as spiritual beings. And he says, look, there's some people. I know there's some people in the Zoom room who may get upset by this and dispute the charge, but he says there's some people, and he's talking specifically about Freud and others, who he sees as taking a reductive approach to the human intellect and the human spirit, Geist in the old German. Um, they thought that, he's talking about Freud in particular, there were others, Schopenhauer. Um, and the idea is that yeah, it looks like we do all these fancy intellectual, spiritual things that are distinct from the kinds of things that animals do. But actually, if you get down to the bottom of it, it's all just animal. There's no possibility of transcending that. It's all purely reductive, and we may as well just find some way to inhabit our animal being. Again, whether this is a good reading of Freud or not is not our concern right now. Um, he says there are the reductionists on the one hand, and then there are thinkers like Hegel and others who seem to think that the human intellect is actually fundamentally separable from our animal. It can achieve a kind of full independence, and then thereby through that independence achieve a kind of mastery over our animality. And we can achieve a kind of just direct rational control if we develop our minds enough. That we can formulate ideas of what it is we ought to do and then get our bodies to fall in line. And Shaler's idea was that no, 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 and both of these are wrong. On the one hand, it's not true, it's not the case that our minds and our spirits are nothing more than our animal instincts. As if you can do. There's a Marxist materialist version of this also. It's not just Freud, where you interpret everything that looks like a higher human aspiration towards something moral or good or wonderful, or it's beauty, and it's really just about money or power or sex or something like that. And everything can be reduced to that. And Shaler says, no, no, no. There really is an integrity and reality to the higher functions of the human spirit. We really are capable of genuine transcendence. We're capable of real goodness. We're capable of real beauty. And also, the rationalists are wrong. It is not the case that our intellects are separable from our bodies. It is never the case that we achieve that kind of independence, and therefore it is never the case that we can win mastery over our bodies through just sheer domination. We can't just develop our intellects so powerfully that we are thereby able to just be spiritual beings without the body. Rather, he has this really interesting conception. So he says the intellect is autonomous, in that it has its own principles. It really does have its own integrity unto itself, its own spiritual meanings and orderings towards transcendence, and yet it is powerless. It's autonomous and independent, but powerless. It has no power of its own. It can't affect reality in the world. In order for the intellect to affect reality in the world, it needs to like hitch a ride with our animality. So what actually makes stuff go is instincts and drives and bodies that need things that go around just bumping into each other, because they need stuff, and they desire things. Um, and what it looks like for the intellect to get purchase on the world and to do something like, let's say, create a society that isn't just about power and violence and greed and lust, but is also about some kind of higher purpose. It requires being in touch with the lower, baser parts of our human reality, the parts of us that just want and desire. We need to be in touch with that. But then find ways that he thinks the intellect can sort of like put images in front of our drives so that and shape the drives, and direct them in the right ways, and through various means can cultivate a better attuned, more sensitive drives that get their pleasure from better sources. Um, okay, and then we saw Hutner make the claim that if you study Torah in the right way, it's not only that you derive instruction for how to lead your human life and how to control your desires and lusts, But that if you learn Torah in the right way, it can then shape what you desire in the first place, and you can come to desire better things progressively over time. So we're never free of our animality, but Torah can, out of, through, by way of our animality, become progressively more spiritual. That's all by way of background. Now, to complete our picture of the what it means for the human and the divine, the moral and the religious to be progressively interwoven. And not just in the level of content that they're mutually entailing, but to try to get at their underlying structure and what this all means. We're going to look at Rav Hutner's Ma'amar Chaf Aleph, Talk 21, again in the talks on Shavuot, where again he's dealing with the question of what is Torah. I'm gonna share my screen here, and this was we're gonna point to. I don't know. I think it was Neil or it was Paul who pointed us directly here last week. Was it you, Neil, about the Haftal Orecha Kamocha, or was Paul? He's pointing down to Paul. So thank you, Paul. And Sarah's here. Awesome. Welcome, Sarah. You're here. You're just in time. Um, as I'm sharing my screen, what we're gonna see is that for Rav Hutner, it's not even so much as I think I put it last time. It's not even so much that, um, this image of the two luchot, which is going to come up here again, which is why I chose this piece, this motif of the two tablets of the law with the Bein Adam L'Chavero, Bein Adam L'Makom being brought together. And it sounds like each one is developed on its own. We develop our morality and we develop our religious piety, and then we find ways to interweave them. And what I think Raviner is going to wind up saying here is that actually developing on both fronts is coterminous. It's simultaneous because they share the same fundamental structure of what it means to be a person. And to put a finer point on it, is it will always be the case that for those of us who are religious and moral people, which is arguably every human being, but at the very least, those of us who are involved in, let's say, just the particular form of observant Jewish life, who, on the one hand, we will find ourselves around other people that we care about and want to do right by. And we will also find ourselves in relation to a body of religious law and text and teaching. And want to do well on that front also. And it will always be the case that we're never doing well enough in either area. We're never giving the people around us what they really need from us. We're never fully caring for them to the extent we should be. Those are infinite obligations. And there's also always there will always fall into a kind of inauthenticity, a kind of just going through the motions. Yeah, we do the things we need to do to care for the people around us, but I'm there for my kids. I get up in the morning, I help them get to school and everything else. But am I really fully inhabiting what it means to love them in those moments? Am I really fully open to them, vulnerable to them, giving them expressively and just inside myself the love that I ought to be feeling in that moment? Or am I kind of grouchy that I need to be up in the morning and doing this and I want to get to my other things and I'm tired and just grouchy and I'm not really focused. I'm just going through the motions. And same things religiously. After I get the kids off to school, I sit down to daven and also I do it and I mean it and it's but also I'm distracted and I'm thinking about things I have to do for work and I've said the same words a million times and there's fall into a kind of inauthenticity to it. And what Hutner is going to say is that the antidote in both cases, or the aspiration in both cases, um, what it looks like to become authentically religious and pious and authentically spiritual and then authentically moral, authentically caring, is going to involve the one and very same process. And it's going to involve us being achieving a certain mode of personality. And it will be just de facto. They'll be in conversation with each other. Sometimes it'll be expressed in the moral realm. Sometimes it'll be expressed in the religious realm. But if we're doing it right, they will just naturally be two sides of the same coin. Okay. Now, and I wanted us again to get some of the actual Refiner text and not just me talking. So I am going to try to get through as much of this as we can. So, Ma'amar Chav Aleph, and I'll highlight as I go and translate freely. We may skip a little bit to make sure we get through as much of it as we need. So he starts with a quotation from the end of Shemona Esrei. Barchenu Avinu Kulanu Kechad Bor Panecha. Bless us, our Father, all of us as one, Kulanu Kechad, with the light of your face. So we find here a particular emphasis on achdut, kulanu ke'achad, all of us as one. Echad dafka. Haguf habakasha, and then this request, Eino el yitbarech b'mor panim. So the basic request that we're asking for in this last bracha of Shemon Esrei is we're asking for God to bless us with the light of His face. Um, Ella shenidabek b'bracha zotorah aktudu ad bracha Torah ze'omer esparcheni. So he says the fundamental request is for the light of God's face, and then yet we just also add in this motif of we want it to be kulanu ke'echad, all as one. And he says none of the other brachot, when we ask for justice or health or parnasa, we don't say kulanu ke'echad. Why, in the context of asking for the light of God's face, do we stress this note of unity? Bet. This is he says this is this is what it's about. This is the meaning of it. He says the fundamental principle on which all of this is based, or the fundamental fact, the fundamental reality, is he Haudaki Adam Nivra Yechidi. All of this is rooted in the idea that the human being is created as an individual, as a solitary being. So Adam Harishon in the Bereshit story is created alone. There are no other human beings. So even though later we come to think human beings are fundamentally social, this becomes a part of the Adam story because it turns out he can't be alone. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But still, it is important theologically and spiritually that Adam is first created alone, independent, solitary. He says, from this fact that Adam is created alone, bursts forth two opposing voices. Bokim hem shnei kolot mitchafim. The first one says, Kulanu bnei echad, bnei av echad nachnu. This is based on a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. The first one says that we are all children of the same father. We are all descendants of Adam, and therefore, came to prakim, prakim shel kupa achat. We're all just parts of one I think basket, and we're all only parts of one whole. And there is one true source to the unity of humanity. So the one hand, because and no one can say, I'm better than you. Well, it's because my parents are better. No, we all have the same father. Ultimately, we're all the same. We're one community because we're all relatives. We're all part of the same family because we all are traced back to Adam. The second voice says, well, the nature of the begetter is in the begotten. And the since the original begetter is Adam, and Adam is a solitary being, it follows that in each of us is imprinted this quality of individuality, of solitariness. And it quotes a Mishnah in Sanhedrin that so even though when a human being uses a mold for a coin, I don't know if a mold is the right word, there's some other word for that. Stamp. How do you form a coin? Doesn't matter. When we use a mold, it's mechanical, and every coin comes out the same. That's the point of it. But God is different because God gives everybody the seal, just like on a coin, the form of Adam Harishon, and yet none of us look the same. We're each individuals, even so we all emulate, or we are all copies of Adam Harishon in that we are each our own person. Adam. And so this is now a trustworthy source for the individuality of the human person. So it turns out that the fundamental fact that Adam was created alone, that gives us these two opposing implications. And we have a shared source, both gamli chud Adam, both for the individuality of the human person, v'gam le'ichud Adam, and for the collectivity and community of all human beings. It's they're two sides of the same coin. We're all children of Adam Harishon. That means that we're all the same family. We're all fundamentally one. There's Achdut. And also, just as the first Adam Harishon was by himself, he was alone. It was simply himself, and not just an instance of some other of a species. So too, we are all individuals. Okay. Gimel. The Khan Nifta, these are the paragraph numbers. וכאן נפתחו השער הזמין מעמיק לפוקוס ישירה בין ייחוד אדם ייחוד אדם להטמעת מוחלטת. And now we come to see, we open up the gate for the one who is trying to understand and who's trying to get to the depths of this apparent contradiction, because it does seem like a contradiction. I'm going to be, on the one hand, if I'm truly an individual and there's nobody like me, then that means, or it seems like it means, that I'm distinct from you, and we're not, that we lack commonality. But to the extent we have commonality, and the extent we are instances of the same species, that seems to deny that I'm truly individual. But he says, no, no, no. Now we can see how that's not right. Because he says both are, in fact, rooted in this characteristic of the solitariness of the creation of the human being. If it weren't for this solitariness, yes, it would be the case that we would just be Briucha limino or liminehu, using the phrase from Breshit, that we would just be created according to our species. And this is how, and it's debatable, this is how classically people thought of animal species. Say like ants don't have individual personalities. Each ant is just an instance of the species ant. And if it weren't the case that Adam was created as a solitary individual, we would have all been like that. We'd have all just been instances of the type human being. And he says, if that's the case, you don't have individuality, and you also don't have community. You just have enkan rak kibbutzim. You just have like groups, like clumps, clusters, piles. Shaladrim, adrim, shekolkima and beish el b'min. And he says, their entire existence is not in the individual person, but rather in the species. He says, this is lashon chachamim kadmonim. He's referencing the language of the early wise people. I think you get this in like medieval Aristotelian philosophy. You also get it in Marx. We have a species man kind of existence. I don't know who is quoting exactly, but I assume the medievals. And so what it means for us to recognize ourselves as human beings created solitarily is to realize that we're not just instances of a species, we're not just members of a class, but we're persons. And that's going to mean that we are who we are. We have the capacity to discern and create as functions of our own personalities, but that's also going to put us into genuine community and relationship with other people who have the same capacities. Right? If we're all just ants, there's no community between the ants. There's just some number of them, all in the same area. They function as a unit, but it's not like you have separate individuals who are then in a relationship. It's only because we are created as solitary individuals, therefore we have genuine personalities, the ability to create and think and do as a function of who we are, not just as a function of our being a member of the species. Therefore, we are ourselves, and therefore we can be in relationship with others, and we can achieve genuine community. Okay, Daled. The makom hamuvhak ligilui yichiduto shel adam hema panim. The distinctive, the chief place wherein the individuality of the human person is revealed is in the face. So others have noticed the resonance of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas here, a Jewish philosopher around the same time, who makes a big deal out of the face as the site of moral focus. And as the rabbis say, just as the faces of human beings are all different, so too their minds are all different. And it's via the face and the way people are expressed through their emotions, their inner spiritual lives are expressed through their faces, that we see that they have different minds, and no two minds are the same. And it's the face in particular which gives expression to the form of Adam Harishon. Um, he quotes a verse in Tehillim, "Hare panecha v'yivashea." We ask God, or the person praying in Tehillim asks for God to shine forth his face so that we will be saved. And the rabbis say, "Anu ein lanu el haras panim bilvad." We only have we have nothing other than the light of your face. So he's going to try to explain what that means. What does it mean that we have nothing other than the light of God's face? It says, as if to say that the individuality of the human person obligates us to say, on the one hand, that the world was created for us, that we are the telos, we're the purpose of the world. So the entire world is created, all the land, the water, and the stars, and then the grass, the plants, and then the animals, and then the human person is created in this one person. And so Adam Rishon is the purpose of humanity, and because we're all children of Adam, we too are the purpose of humanity. And this is a radical shift, because again, right, if I'm just a member of the species, so you can say, well, the story of the world is. Well, it's about the world. It's about the cosmos. And the individual, the individual ant running around is not a character in the story. It's not the point of the story. The story is about the world overall. But the idea that there's this human being that's created in solitary fashion, it allows the human person to then say, I am the purpose of all this. The story is about me. Um, and he says, when Adam was first created, it was clear, it was clear and obvious that he is the point of creation. That's what all of this is about. But after God puts his hand upon him and pushes him down, meaning that God declares that he will die, then this recognition that um, Adam is the telos of the world. Now it'll be hard to tell. So it was clear that Adam, when he was first created, it was clear he was the purpose of the world. But once you have the reality of death, it is no longer clear. Because the realization of death, the appearance of death in the world appears to negate the recognition of the world is here for me, I'm the purpose of the world. Because after the individual human person dies, the world is still there. And so it looks like, and if you're telling the story of all of this, the story is way, way longer and much grander than any one individual human life. The world's been around for billions of years. So if you're telling the story of the world, it's weird to say, well, the point of it is the human, because as humans in general have only been around for a small amount of that time, and for any particular human, we're a little blip on the screen. And so if we die, we're mortal and finite, then how can it be that we're the point of all of this? And then, Rak mitocha amunah, it is only by way of faith, Rav Hutner says. It's only by way of faith that eventually the edict of death will pass. And eventually God will heal the wound of the edict of death, that we can then say again that no, it's death that's temporary and it's life that is truly eternal. Human life is eternal. And it's rak mitoch emunazo, it's only from out of this faith that we become capable to like revivify in our souls recognition that we are the purpose of the world. So even though right now, today, where we don't see the reality of the resurrection of the dead, that death will be gone from the world. We only see that we have to look within ourselves. It's a spiritual reality, a kind of internal personal faith. Yes, we have to find it within ourselves. We don't see it out in the world. Mikol makom nishar lanu roshem kol shehu. We do have remaining to us a minimal trace of this reality in the form of the in the form of the revelation of the individuality of the human person. Hamatzav shel Gilui Adam Yichidut Adam, Asher mitocho akar shel Mishalim Nira Navas B'Yesharim. And Mahu Shmo Shel Rosh Hashanah, what's the name of this residual trace of our eternality, of our individuality, and therefore our eternality? All of which is just a sort of like remaining survivor of the revelation of our individuality. Shmo Shel Rosh Hashanah, the name of this trace is Me'or Panav Shel Adam, is the face of the human person. It is in the face of the human person. In our situation, that's the one place that gives us partial revelation, and only in a small, diminutive, deficient way, that we are more than merely passing beings. That we're not just instances of a species, that we're not just a part of the landscape in some broader cosmic tale, but we are the point of all of this. We are the telos. We see that because when we look at a human being, so you can, if you can look at a fellow human being, and many people have, and we all do this all the time. When you go through the grocery store, so if you're good, and we all try, you get to the checkout person, and you try to recognize, look, this is a human being that's standing there, and they've been there all day, and they're tired, and their job is to smile at me and make small talk. And this is probably a miserable job. Maybe they love it too, which would be great. Um, I'm sure I've definitely met people who do, like the Trader Joe's people always do. And but it's so natural to just treat them as just part of the landscape, as if they were a machine. They're just there for you to help you get your groceries out. And you may give them a perfunctory, hi, how's it going? But you're not relating to them in any way as a person. They're just, again, a part of the structure around you. And you can relate to entire groups, races, nations of human beings like this as just material or fodder for some other purpose. And you can think that all of humanity is like this. There are a lot of people now in the sort of like tech world and interesting political groupings think, like really we should probably like humanity is a bad idea. We should probably get rid of it because we're bad for the earth, and what matters is the earth. And so we should get rid of humanity. It's entirely natural and possible for us to, we can take it to an extreme, and we're always, on some level, we have this feeling that, yeah, we're all just part of the cosmos. But if you see a human being and you really look at their face and you see that there's something expressed there, there's a spirituality, there's a mind, their feelings, their passions and cares and loves and needs, that are individual to that person. There's structures of personality that are them. It's Alex, it's Neil, it's Sarah, it's you know, it, um, and it's them. It's not just an instance of a type. And you see that through the face. Then you come to see and remember that actually we're not just passing temporary, fleeting parts of the broader cosmic story, but in a real sense, we're eternal. We're spiritual, we're transcendent, and we are something beyond. We come from somewhere beyond, and our destiny is somewhere beyond just a fleeting moment in time. And this is what the rabbis say. "Ve'anu ein lanu ela harat panim bavad." What does it mean that we have nothing but the light of the face? It's because there's this midrash that or the Gemara that originally when Adam was created, even his heel shone like a light from across. Was a light that shone across the world. Um, but the only trace of that we have left, of that illumination that came from the human person, is through the face. Okay, now that we have all of this, he says, we know that the light of the face is wherein the one place, the chief place, in which is recognized that we are created alone, and therefore we are individuals, and therefore also we are communal beings, all in the same moment. This all becomes clear. So then, yeah, when we pray, to go back to the beginning, when we pray for the light of God's face, we invoke the notion of unity or community. which is tied up with this revelation of the light of the face. And notice, just offhand, that he is conflating without mentioning at all any note of it at all, the light of our human faces and the light of God's face. These are the same thing. Um, idea. And so this is what the formulation the rabbis gave us. Bless us all as one, because our oneness, which is a function of our individuality, becomes clear through the light of our faces, which comes from the light of God's face. We're gonna. I want to dive through the next pieces, but I want to pause. Any comments, questions, thoughts about what we just did? And there was a lot of material there, and I'm moving quickly.
No comments in chat,
Okay.
but people should please feel welcome to speak up.
Yeah, and interrupt me too. I know there are a lot of words here. Okay, so now we're back. So remember I said I wanted to follow through on take us through a final journey with this motif of the two luchot, the two tablets which are different but the same. They're Shavot, and what Torah is. And what the covenant between ourselves and God is the progressive interweaving of the Ben Adam Chavero and Ben Adam Makom. So he says, Kama Pamim, we've already seen several times. And many times we've dealt with this measure of the equivalence between the interpersonal and the human divine and the giving of the luchot. There are five commandments on each, five Ben Adam Makom, five Ben Adam Chavero. And right. This like that the Luchot is the like prime site where we have this equivalence. And so he says, I want to revisit this. And he says, I think there's gonna be something new we can say about this here. Okay, now this is what I think Paul mentioned last week. It says in the Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your fellow like yourself. The Ramban says that when it says like yourself, ha kamocha hu b'derech haflaga. This is an exaggeration, kind of linguistic extravagance. And he gives two reasons for why this is a linguistic extravagance to say you should love your friend like yourself. One, no human heart will actually accept upon itself to love their fellow as much as they love themselves. We love ourselves a lot. And to put someone else, anybody else, even somebody you really love, on par with yourself, the human heart will reject that. The Od Zehu Neged Hadim. He says it's against what we know from halakha, because the halakhic rule is chayecha kol bin chavercha. If you are in a situation, you're in the desert, you've got one jug of water, and you need it to survive. If you split the water with somebody else, with your friend, you both die, but if you keep it, then you live. Um, and if you give it to the other person, then they live. You don't give it to them for them to live. You keep it for yourself. You come first. And so he says it's not true that you're supposed to love the fellow as much as yourself. You're supposed to prioritize yourself. And so it must be that when it says "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," it doesn't fully mean it. It means it in this kind of motive. It's a term of a manner of speech, but a kind of exaggeration. And he says, this is a storm in our hearts. And a wonder to the eyes. How can you say, how can we say about the Torah, one of the mitzvot, that the commandment is a matter of exaggeration, that doesn't have contact with reality? And also, how can it be that it's not like, and to say that it's not in keeping with the actual halakha? How can it be? How can the Raman say that? And what does it mean for us to interpret a law in the Torah, one of the mitzvot, as not really meaning what it says? We don't generally do that. We don't say like the laws of kashrut don't really mean what they say. No, they mean them, and if they're hard, they're hard. And here the Raman says, no, that's not right. The Raman is saying, like, he says it's important for us to understand that this mitzvah is a hagzama, it's a kind of exaggeration. So Hutner is asking, what's this about? It goes on. The two aspects of the individuality of the human person and the community of the human person are both tied again to the creation of the person of Adam, and that we're not just an instance of a species. And he says the summit, the apex of our of what it means for us to be a community, to be unified as human beings, is the mitzvah of "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha." We love others like ourselves. You can't do better than that. And he says, and the only way you could ever imagine that is if you really, that we are, others are like ourselves, is if you really were to see fully, recognize that we are all children of the same Adam Harishon. But we, again, as we saw, we don't recognize that we are children of Adam because, and it's a function of the reality of death. Because of the reality of death, we have trouble. We can't see. Our recognition is occluded from recognizing that we are truly individual persons. That I'm like not just an instance of the species and just a part of the cosmic landscape. That I'm Alex Ozar, and that means something. There's a purpose to that on its own. Um, that recognition is negated by the reality of death. And there's no way for us to fully vivify in our souls the recognition that the world was created for us, that we are the telos of the world, except again by way of faith, a kind of internal spiritual recognition of in the resurrection of the the resurrection of the dead, and that death is not ultimate. Um, but that's not something we see in the world. That's something we feel in the world. Our reality, our daily lives, is the reality in which death is sovereign. And so he says, Nimsa diyesh kan lefanenu shalshelet shel halamot. There's a chain of hidings, and each link in the chain is tied one to the next. The appearance of death in the world, um, hides the recognition that we are created, that we are the point of the world, and thereby it occludes the recognition that we are of the individuality of the human person, and thereby it occludes the reality, the recognition of the community of human persons, because if we're not individuals, we can't be in relationship either. And because we can't see the reality of the community of human persons, we also can't see at all the true equality of other people. Again, because of the reality of death, we can't recognize that we are the purpose of the world. Because we can't recognize that we are the purpose of the world, we can't recognize that we are truly individuals. Because we can't recognize we're truly individuals, we can't recognize that we are truly in community, in relationship with others. And because we can't recognize that we're truly a community, there's true achdut between us and everyone else, therefore we cannot see and recognize in our present day terrestrial reality in our unredeemed reality, we cannot see that we are meant to love others as we do ourselves. This recognition is denied from us. We're going to do the next piece outside because we don't have time to read it all through. He then adverts to the nevuah, in Zechariah, I believe. And there will be on that day the depiction of the final redemption of the world. Yeah, Hashem Echad, that God's name will be one, or Hashem will be one, and his name will be one. The Gemara in Pesachim asks, is God not one now? True, we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad every day. So what does it mean that only at the eschaton, the end of days, at the final redemption, that God will be one and his name will be one? And what the Gemara says is, well, yes, God is truly one. But right now, our reality is that when good things happen, we say Baruch Hatov Hameti. We say blessed is the one who's good and who does good. And when bad things happen, we say Baruch Dayana Emes. Blessed is the true judge. Aval Bayom Ahu, but on that day, in the final redemption, when all becomes clear, we will be able to say, we will say Hatov Hameti for all of it, for good things and hard things. Because we'll see that all of the things that happened to us, including death, and everything that's happened, everything that happens to us is a function of, or is the act of the one true God. We're not split into this good mom and bad mom, good God and bad God. It's all one true God. And what redemption is that we come to be in relation to that one true God. And again, he says, look, we know, we believe internally, spiritually, right now. We say it every day, twice a day. We believe that God is one, but we don't feel it. We can't truly inhabit that reality because of the reality of death and human suffering and evil and everything awful that happens in the world, that we simply cannot. We're lying. And we're not doing it, we're not doing any favors. It's not a compliment to God, not an act of love to God to pretend that we experience human pain and suffering and death as the gracious, beneficent act of a loving God. That is, it would be kind of offense. Like, it's not honest. We do not feel it that way. Actually, there is a real struggle, and we relate to God as having caused us real pain that we recoil from and say, why did we deserve that? Or we did deserve that, and I feel bad about it. But we don't just say, oh, thank you for that horrible thing you did to us. And it would be dishonest. We'd be lying. Um, that is our reality. So there's this balance where we have intellectually, spiritually, we know that God is truly one, and all the bad things that happen really are a function of this one true, loving, beneficent God, but we can't feel it yet. And so we need to find a way, what faith, what emunah and bitachon involves, what tefillah involves, is fully inhabiting the current present world wherein we suffer and there is pain and death, and it's all very, very, very real. And we're not going to lie to ourselves about it. We're not going to pretend it's all fine. And then find a way to remain in touch spiritually, intellectually, with this point out in the future, this transcendent reality, the spiritual reality that we hope for, we believe will come at the end of days, when the dead will be resurrected and we will see that everything will be made right and good. And we'll see this all at the hands of the one true and fully loving God. And so religious piety, what it means to be a believer in Hashem, comes with this kind of aspirational structure. It says, you if you take religion seriously, to be the kind of religious person who says everything is great, is a failure on Hutner's picture. If everything's fine now, you're not doing the right thing. What you should be aiming for is in a full recognition, inhabiting the pain, the brokenness of the present, but to be in touch and draw yourself towards the moment and the anticipated moment of the future, the moment that we believe in, we trust will come, that we hope for, long for, where it will become clear. We will actually finally be able to feel and inhabit the world in which there is one true, loving, fully beneficent God. And then in that like structure of aspiration where we're drawing ourselves out of the present moment towards some moment in the future, um, our the hope is, the goal is that that structure of aspiration will bear fruit in our lives in the present. It won't be the fully realized state of the redeemed reality, but will start to bring some little trace of that future reality into the present. Okay. And then in Yud Aleph, the very same thing in the language of the Ramban about love your neighbor like yourself. And remember, the Ramban says that it's kamohu aflaga. It's an exaggeration. And again, Bavadai Shekenu Emet, yeah, it's true. It's true. We should love our friends like ourselves. We really should. And we can, on some level, we can see that. We don't deserve anything more than anybody else does. And we should treat others as if they're just as deserving of care as we are. But just as to say Hatov HaMeitiv um, about bad things would be true. Yes, that is the when we know when bad things happen, it is a result, an action of the one true loving God. But it would be a kind of illicit exaggeration. Um, because we couldn't say it honestly. We couldn't really mean it. Um, just so is the same dynamic when it comes to loving our friends like ourselves. Because the truth is that, yeah, we and our friends are all on one level. Sorry. Yeah, let's just skip down to the bottom here. Madrigat kamocha. He Piskat Achdut Ha'adam. Yesh kan dimyon tzur Yozar kiviyachol. The to love our fellow like ourselves is the acme of the unity of the human person, and involves the emulation of the creature of the creator by the creature. That just as one day we believe the unity of God will become clear, and that'll become clear at the end of days. So too it is only at the end of days that the true unity of humanity will become clear. And again, trace the chain of reasoning. We'll do this one final time. It's the very same structure, the very same chain of reasoning in both cases. It is because we die and because we suffer and we're frail and human and we pass away from the world that we have trouble seeing that we are the telos, we're the purpose of the world. That's hard for us to make sense of. It's because we have trouble seeing that we are the purpose of the world, which means that we are principles unto ourselves. We're not just instances of the structures around us or of the species. We create and do based on our own principles and based on our own personalities. But for that, we need to see that we are truly individuals. And then it's by seeing that we're truly individuals, we see that we're truly in community and relationship. And it's because we see, based on the idea that we see that we really are in community, that we can see that we ought to treat others really like we are ourselves. So the chain again is that the reality of death in the present negates all of that. Because we die, we feel like we are just nothing. We don't matter. And because we don't matter, that means other people don't matter. And we may as well, again, just do go through the motions of human life and the way that, animals just pursue their own lusts and desires and advantages. We'll do that in a more sophisticated way, in a much more interesting way. But fundamentally, we're just going to be expressions of the underlying forces in the world. It's not going to be anything special or distinctive or human or personal. Um, and that's because we have trouble seeing ourselves as genuinely spiritual beings because we can't see ourselves as individuals because we know that we die. It is only because we believe, in both cases, we believe that one day there will be the resurrection of the dead and death will be negated. Therefore, on the one hand, we can believe that we really are eternal beings. We are genuinely spiritual and transcendent beings. We really have a purpose. We are called to something higher. We can be who we are as individuals, and therefore we can be genuinely in relationship with others, and we matter, and other people matter, not just as things, but as persons. And therefore, yeah, we should treat them with real love and care like we treat ourselves, because we're not just driven by forces. We make choices, and we can make choices based on love and reason. And so too, we relate to God, we believe in God, and right now, because of the reality of death, we can't see God as unified. We can't see God as integrated. Um, because of the reality of death, but we believe that one day death will be negated, and therefore we will be able to see the reality of God as one. And therefore um, we can be fully human. And so all of this to tie it all together, we're not going to read through the rest of the piece, and maybe we'll just go to one last little very short section in his to conclude in his section on and his teachings on Rosh Hashanah. But first to try to tie what we just learned together. Um, our in both the religious case and the moral case. There's a way of doing religion. There's a way of doing morality, which is flat and natural and just a function of impersonal forces. We're just doing the things we're supposed to do, just going through the motions. And there's nothing individual about Alex Ozar doing it. It's just a function of Alex being a member of the species who happen to have been raised in this world, in this particular tradition, and just does the things. But what does it mean for Alex to aspire, or what does it mean for Alex to do it authentically, to really be in touch with the God who he can't quite feel and can't quite fully be in relationship with right now? And for what does it mean for Alex to truly love the people around him, truly care for the people around him, um, knowing to make good on his knowledge that they matter just as much as he does? And in both cases, what is called for is a structure of aspiration where we latch onto this conviction, belief, faith in a fully integrated world, which correlates to a fully integrated personality, where we can inhabit, if we can truly understand ourselves as persons, not just as things. Because we really were created as the purpose of the world. We really are individuals. And because we really are individuals, we're persons where who we are matters, and our loves matter, and our cares matter, and our minds matter. Despite the fact that we're animals, and despite the fact that we're going to die, and despite the fact that we're just little blips on this in the cosmic screen. If we can get in touch with that, we can then aspire. And we can draw forth that aspiration, that hope, that reality, the eschatological reality into our present. And every day when I'm trying to care for those people around me, I'm never gonna, as the Ramban says, it's vital that I recognize. We don't do this with other mitzvot, but we do say about v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha that it's a guzma. You have to recognize that we're never doing enough. That just the surface of the law is never sufficient. We're always inauthentic in our living up to our moral standards. Um, and what we're called to do is to always aspire for more, to see that what we really owe to each other is fundamentally eschatological. We are meant to get a hold, to grasp to whatever extent we can, the reality of the end of days, where it will become clear that we really are human beings and that God really is the one true loving God. And this will pull us more and more progressively, both towards genuine, authentic faith and religious practice, and in the other side of the same coin, will pull us towards genuine, authentic care for the people around us and keep pulling us progressively towards higher and higher standards. The last text, just to put a little cherry on it, I know there was a lot here. I'm happy to stay for a few minutes if anybody wants to comments or questions. It was the end of his the first section of his Kuntras HaChesed, his treatise on kindness, is how he introduces Rosh Hashanah. It's an amazing piece. Um, he says that it is, there are various character traits, that we're supposed to develop. They're all good and important, various virtues. But it is in our developing ourselves and ascending in the capacity for kindness, for love and care, that we don't just get better at conducting ourselves in the world, but we create our world. We reshape our world. Because again, we can live in a world where it's just this complex concatenation of forces, and we're just cogs in the machine that are here to pursue our own advantage, our own interests, instincts, and needs. But we can create a world where kindness matters, where love and care actually matter because we're persons, we're individuals, we're not just things, we're not just animals. Um, and it's because by way of becoming the kind of people who care and love, even when it's hard, even when it's against our own interests, even when we have to make sacrifices, their costs, and even where it's not what our animal instincts would dictate, we still act on the imperatives of care and love. We actually create ourselves, not just our world. This is correlation. We create our world and we create our personality. And that personality is the image of God. What does it mean for us to be in the image of God? we are created in the image of God, and then we realize that image. We make that real by virtue of becoming beings who care and are willing and able to love, treat others like ourselves, based on a recognition in the ultimate integration of the divine, and that makes real the re or gives the makes real makes good on the promise of our being created in the image of God. And he says the very same thing is true in the other direction. And this is a one of his most provocative theological statements from a traditional perspective. Mi she'enu osek b'gemilut chasadim, somebody who does not engage in kindness, doma k'mi she'en lo eloka, is as if they have no God, as the Gemara in Ozar says, which there it means, you're acting like there's no God. But he says, no, it's not just you're acting like that. Kishem shebli midas chazo shel bori kivyachol ein makom l'nivarim. This is just as without God's kindness, there's no space for human beings. We only exist because God cares about us and loves us. So too, without the character of kindness, of love and care of creatures, there's no place for God. On some very real, he has the kivyahol, the as it were, but the reality of God and the reality of the moral person, not the person who just does the right things sometimes, but the person who genuinely cares, who genuinely aspires to move beyond the limits of our human finitude and just the natural species level pursuit of instinct and interest. The person who genuinely cares and genuinely loves, even at cost. That is both reflecting the reality of of our being created in the divine image, and the fact that we really are human persons, we really are individuals. And on one level, that really reflects and constitutes the reality of God, which is what we saw in the talk on Shavuot. The ultimately, our religion, our faith, and our morality have to be. They are fundamentally, when we take them both seriously, when we take them both authentically, they are fundamentally one and the same thing. Thank you all so much. I am totally happy to stick around for a few minutes or to talk any other time. It's really been a pleasure learning with you. I'm sorry, I know there was a ton of material I was trying to get through in 4 sessions.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Ozar. Just before we dive into any last questions, I just want to highlight some upcoming classes at Drisha. We are having a one-day class on December 25th, and if you are not otherwise occupied, I recommend taking time for learning with Drisha at Kichem Chayinu, a window into Israeli life from Drisha, Israel. You can sign up for that on drisha.org/classes. And Rabbi Ozar, if people have any, they're watching later and they have questions or they think of something after class, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Alex Ozar at gmail.com is very effective. And
All one word?
I would love to be in touch, all one word.
All right. And I'm happy to keep the class open for a bit if people still have questions.
Sarah, what are you thinking?
Uh, Hi, Ram Alex. Sorry, I'm on video. I have a cold and I'm sort of not
Oh,
totally Zoom presentable. But thank you so much for this. I wanted to ask a little bit about the use of this text from Mishnah Sanhedrin in the context of like it's the reality of death that makes it hard to for us to acknowledge the fact that for our sake and for everyone's sake is the world created because we're all persons. Just because like I think this text comes up in the context of like the injunction to the witness in a capital trial, right?
right.
So I'd just be curious if either Ralph Hutner in maybe one of the surrounding pages or you have a take about the relationship there. And maybe more generally, right, like between the kind of more ordinary existentialist ethics that I think seems to be um, at play here and the original context of it's in some ways that injunction arises from the context of and is especially important in not just like reckoning with our mortality as such or generically, but specifically in the wake of, say, a murder and on the cusp of, you know, perhaps another killing that appears to be or is felt as licensed by Torah, if not obligated.
It is so interesting. I need to give that a lot more thought. It's hard that Mishnah in Sanhedrin it goes on this series of riffs and expand on the original notion. But I think you're right to see that it must be part of that original context. And yeah, I mean, I just offhand, we had a conversation the other day offline in a different, I think part of our brokenness of humanity is in the present day in our unredeemed state is not just that death happens, but that we're in a reality where we kill, and that again, we let's say on the traditional rabbinic and biblical view, and I think even on my present day independent ethical view, there are times when we have an imperative to kill. And on one level, like that imperative can seem like, and I think actually be on one level, the command of God. Um, like we have to keep our families safe, we have to keep ourselves safe, and so somebody's coming at you with a gun, you kill them first, as the rabbis put it. Um, but that may be, um, yes, on one level that's true and reflects our current relationship with God, given the brokenness of the world and the non-integration of the divine persona. But we have to find a way, even when we're engaged in the world wherein we kill, we're just find ourselves in that world. But we need to find some way to, and precisely in those moments, find a way to stay in touch with this other reality or this projected eschatological reality where God is saying something different, which is that you're all actually just human beings, and therefore you're all individuals and you're all equals. And there can be no place for killing. And you can see the trace of that in the human face. That's, the Levinas piece really comes in after the Holocaust. But, Sarah, we should talk more. Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Rabbi?
Please, Paul.
This Article 21 of Shavuot is a pivotal article, which I think he deals with the singularity of man and the unity of man. And of course, at the beginning, he says if the singularity of man means that man should say, Bishvili nivra olam. The world was created but for me. But what happens after 120 years? Guess what? We're gone. Is the world also gone? If in fact it was true, Bishvili nivra olam, the world should collapse at that time. But it goes on quite well without us. And I think at the end, where he gives the validity to our feeling versus our faith, when God forbid we lose someone, we are koveya, the bracha, according to our feeling, not according to our faith. We bless Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, not Hatova Ha'metiv. In another part of his writings, he talks about why do we cover our eyes when we recite the Shema? So as a kid, you learn to cover your eyes so that you could concentrate. He doesn't say that. He says he uses a loaded term, to be nistalek min ha'olam. As long as we're part of olam hasheker and olam haperud, we cannot say in true faith, Hashem echad u'shmo echad. It's only when we remove ourselves from this world by covering our eyes, then we can actually proclaim the achdut of Hashem echad u'shmo echad.
That was really well put. Thank you, Paul. All right. Have a wonderful night, everybody. I
You
look
too.
forward to be in touch.
Take
Thanks.
care, everyone.
Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Drisha.
Pleasure learning with you all, and be well.